You are listening to Face the Sun. My name is Gaia, and I'm your host. Welcome to a show where we discuss matters of religion, belief, and unbelief. For this episode, I have my friend Bill LaMorey on the line. Hi there, Bill.
Hi, Gaia. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
I'm so happy you're here. Bill and I have been friends for years. We worked together many years ago, and Bill is the pastor of Calvary Fellowship. And his website is calvaryhartford.com. They meet at Conrad High School in West Hartford. And if you need any information as far as going to services, they're all online at this time with the coronavirus. And then we'll again be meeting physically at the high school. But you can go online to their website at calvaryhartford.com to get any information. So I'm glad you're here, Bill.
Oh, I'm so glad to be with you. And I've been a fan of your podcast since it came out, and have just enjoyed listening to it on a personal level, both from the quality standpoint. I appreciate your production value, but also the content has been fascinating, and I think it's a cool thing that you've set out to do. So I'm excited to be on the journey with you, and for today to be part of it with you.
Oh, I appreciate that. So one of the things that I had mentioned to you and was thinking about is with your church having so many people coming to the high school, and it's a very wonderful group that goes there. I've visited you there a few times, and I'm imagining that at these times it's more difficult with the coronavirus. So I'm wondering how that's affected you, Bill, and how that's affected the church.
Oh boy, that's a great question, and it's it's kind of like every person is affected, but also if you are part of an organization, whether it's a church or a nonprofit or a business, you're having tons of challenges to what you do. And I was talking to other people, and I think so. You asked on a personal level, as a pastor and responsible for making lots of decisions. I think what a lot of us that are in this position, and again, whether it's church or anything else, we're facing decision fatigue at some point, because you're making complicated decisions in an environment of great uncertainty. And it's like you watch national news, and just you're in a pandemic. We've never lived in our lifetime through one before, so we all have to be humble and learn and grow with this, and then figure out what regulations look like. So again, it is a challenging thing on a personal level. On a church level, it's obviously we've moved all of our services online, as you can imagine. Schools, we were shut down a week before most churches because the schools made a decision, and so because we're in rented facilities there, which we love doing, we had no choice, and it wasn't going to be long before anyone else did either. But we quickly moved. We have a great group of people with some high tech skills, so we quickly moved everything online, and that's great. We could still do our music, our messages, and we've tried to keep that really high quality. But the glue of any church or faith-based organization is people. It's the community. So that has been the most challenging, is how to connect people together. And we have our online platform where people can interact, but it's just not the same as running into someone, putting an arm around a shoulder, or a firm handshake, or whatever people have different preferences even prior to COVID-19 of comfort level. But just the idea, eyeball to eyeball, and being able to encourage each other and be around each other, that's been super, super hard. So those are some of the challenges, and there's been opportunities that have come from it too. But I think we're all feeling that. And I guess what I would say is, for the most part, we seem to have weathered the storm as well as could possibly be expected. Again, there's so much that's still unknown. What happens when we start reemerging eventually, reopening? Does everybody come back? What is it? Is that, there's all those questions that everybody has during that. I guess my concern is for, when you look at any church, or at least for our church, it's not just okay, we are the 100% all in saints, faith, deep, strong, rooted. It's that with a collection of people that have maybe had a wandering type of faith, or people that are brand new to faith. And so this hits. And then there's people we have at our church that are really just kicking the tires and checking it out. And you hope to see some of those people back. You hope that they're in their faith journey continuing to move along. But despite us trying to reach out to everybody and call everyone and check in with everybody, it's not the same. But I also am concerned about other churches. I know that a lot of churches are in a different position, whether because they're highly leveraged with property or staff, or some in inner city environments with less giving online and so forth. And this has been a significant challenge for many. So I say that to say it's impacted us. I recognize it's impacted churches, synagogues, everyone all over the place. And we're all trying to step up and figure out how do we do what we do in this environment where we probably will be among the last of people in whatever phases to be able to operate in the way that we traditionally do because of the large gatherings.
Right. Yeah, because everybody's so close to get together. They're opening up the stores now, and on the 20th, I just saw yesterday that they decided, it was after we met up quickly, that they decided to not do the hair salons to be opened. So I imagine that, yeah, the churches would be one of the last ones to happen.
Mm.
It's been a unique challenge for me too, because I started this podcast
Yeah.
thinking, one of the projects that just came to me in a light bulb moment. After I read Andy Stanley's book, I thought, this guy is a Christian who actually appreciates people like me, which isn't the case many times. So I thought, let me try this. One of the things he did in his book was he would talk about how he went to different places with his wife, and I think they dropped off their child in one of the whatever childcare centers of the
Mhm.
church. And what is that called?
The
I guess
kids
childcare, right?
programming, or
His program. Okay.
yeah, I mean, kids service, that they call it kind of different names at everything, but basically either depending on if they're super young, it's just basically childcare. But for a lot
Right.
of it, it's
Okay.
kids programming depending on their age or stage.
Right. And one of the stories they told was when they went there, there was only one person there, one guy, no other kids, and he's like, "Hi, okay." And then they went upstairs and they felt very uncomfortable. And as they
Yeah.
were sitting there, like talking to each other, like, "Do you want to go down? Should I go down? I can't take it." They couldn't even stand being up there for 5 minutes. And Andy's wife went down, and she then saw there were several more adults and several more kids, and she felt a little more comfortable. And they talked about other things about the welcoming of the building, or the this and that. And I've bounced around to a lot of places to see what would work, and nothing's ever really clicked, which is fine. It's, knowing where I stand, and then certainly just being open. So I thought, I'm going to do 52 and 52, and I'm going to visit 52 places. And that was all well for January and February, and now that's
Sure.
come to a stop. But seeing people eyeball to eyeball makes all the difference. It's doing this online stuff. I'll poke around. I'll visit different places here and there. But for even where I stand, I can't wait for it to open up, because it's such a fascinating thing to go experience people, being how they interact, and what they say and don't say, and what's going on. It's a, I don't know, open environment to be at, than instead of watching on the web. But I'm grateful that you have very nice design too. I saw you've got a nice studio and different things that you're doing.
Yeah, well, it is wonderful. So one of the things that, I've got a friend, he's a construction sort of handyman guy. He's super skilled and talented. He's in another state, but he, with the restrictions that were on, and I know they're now lifting in his state, he was limited. He was not able to do anything that he did for a little period of time. And I'm just fortunate that we were able to do something for this period, and we're able to encourage people. And super cool, by the way, we're getting neighbors and others that maybe it would have been a barrier for them to show up on a Sunday morning, but they're like, "Oh, I checked
Mhm.
out your service," or whatever. And so it's kind of that cool silver linings thing that we are reaching
Yep.
for. And there's our churches, we get tons of people that move into the area, tons of people that move out of the area, kind of like Connecticut, the story of that. But
Right.
we've got lots of what we call alum kind of coming in. Now they're dialing into our services now that we're doing them all online. So that's been kind of fun, I guess, in that sense. But yeah, it's never meant, it's a good tool, and we'll keep a digital service going permanently, because I think that's just sort of the new, frontier of reaching folks that there's, for lots of different reasons, that aren't going to set foot in your church, at least for some time. But we can't wait to get back to our regular getting together and connecting with people. And you are so right that when you do that, it's very important that you have an environment, because yes, eyeball to eyeball is important, but also what's on the other end of the eyeball. And I know that, and what I mean is, what I love what you're doing is you're going in and you're saying, sort of, here's my biases or lack of biases going in. Hey, here's what I hope to get out of this, and I don't know what I'm going to get out of this, but I've appreciated that you've gone in checked out, sort of just kind of dropped in, helicoptered into these environments and just said, hey, here's my observations, and come up with some things that, hey, I don't agree necessarily with this, but I really like this. Or I've also appreciated, thought it was classy when you just really couldn't find anything good to say, that you withheld the names. I just thought that was
Yeah.
good of you, because it would have been easy to not do that. And I think that's good, because, like any of us could have a bad day or a bad experience, or just not be for certain people. But I love Andy Stanley. I've been listening to his stuff for, oh my goodness, close to 20 years. So he's been a big influence on me, both in terms of teaching, but also in terms of leadership and philosophy. And yeah, exactly what he said. I've had the same experience where I show up in environments and they don't know I'm not Pastor Bill. I'm just Bill showing up at a service. And yeah, there's things that I too would find, and I'm like, wow, that's really, really good. And other things I'm like, kind of cringe. And had similar experiences with the kids where we actually didn't leave our kids because it didn't feel comfortable for us. And I think that one of the things Andy's great at is, how do you intentionally lower barriers for people exactly like yourself or others who are in varying, like, places of either disbelief, or, hey, I'm agnostic, I'm atheist, or maybe I'm open to this, but I don't know anything about it. And we can't just assume that everyone knows the deal and is going to come in. And so I think our job, and you see this in any good organization, is how do you lower the barriers and make it easy for people. So to some of the things that you've said, and I've loved hearing your experiences. Hey, be friendly when people come, but don't be too friendly. There's
Yeah.
this sort of fine line of doing that. Don't call people out with undue attention in a public way to embarrass them. But how do you acknowledge they're there?
Right.
How do you speak to someone? I know one of the things when I teach, I always look at it from a dual side. It's like you've got to teach to and help people grow in their faith that believe like you do, but you also have to recognize that there are people that don't believe, that it's their first time. Maybe a friend dragged them along, kicking and screaming to come with them, or like you, who knows, they're doing something like you and checking it out. It doesn't mean that you have to apologize for what you believe, or tiptoe. I've just found people, just a simple thing like, hey, if you're here today and you're not a Christian, and just say something, it's a simple thing, and it helps people see, oh, they know I'm here. They've acknowledged me, and at that point, it's like, you don't have to agree with anything I said, but you can at
Right.
least say that, okay, I appreciate they know I'm there.
Yes.
So that's one of the things we try to be intentional about, and maybe one week we do better at it than another week, but I think it's important.
Yeah, I think even Andy, who's written the book on it, and he's well known for it, there'll be a week I'll listen, I'll think, "Oh, that's interesting. He never acknowledged that anybody was not a believer was listening to him." It's so rare, but it doesn't unsettle me, because I think because he goes out of his way so much that you would never think, "What the hell is this?" And throw toss
Right.
over a table and march out. You'd think, "Oh," he just goes over your head because he does it so well so often that you're not doesn't bother you. But I am always surprised at how, I think I've been out of the church for 25 years or so. And because when I got divorced, I was so wanting something, some kind of
Hmm.
connection, and then would start going around. And, I drive by, I might have said this on another podcast, I don't know, but that I would drive by some churches and go slowly and start looking over, and Luke would slide down in the car seat, like, "Oh no, oh please." And I go, let's go around. Let's drive around. Let me look in the windows." And I wonder what time. And he would just he'd get statuesque. Like he just thought if he could just disappear and if he didn't move too much, I wouldn't get too excited about it. And I'd say, let's go see, maybe there's some nice people there.
Right.
And, if they weren't too fanatical or too intense, or if they weren't too, you must be exactly like us to be a part of us, those kind of places can chase you away pretty quickly. So if they
Sure.
had this kind of openness, and the way that you can tell that they're open, if they're like, "Hey, listen, you might not believe like we do, and that's cool. We're happy you're here." And Andy will say something like, "I'm about to say something that if you're not a Christian, you're going to be really happy. You're really happy that you're
Right.
not." And then he'll
Yeah.
say whatever he says, and like whatever he's like playing, both, the crowd, in a sense of a very respectful way, but talking to both people. And I just think that when I actually have said to some pastors, when I would go to someplace more regularly and just say, you don't even acknowledge me, and I'm not the only me here.
Right.
I'm not the only one like me here. That there's, that husbands or wives are being dragged, spouses are being dragged to your church, and they don't
Sure.
want to be there. And they're being polite, and maybe they have some friends, and that's about it. But they don't really want to. They'd rather sleep in or go play, golf or go relax or do whatever. And now you're putting them in this place, and they're just behaving themselves. Or a young adult, child who's a young adult, or college or high school, who's just going through the motions just because they want everybody off their back. So I wouldn't be the only one there. I just thought it was like wild, and I would say that, and I still couldn't get acknowledged. I thought there's some people who really don't want to do that. They just like, as if it'll make it worse or something. I don't know.
Well, you know what? I was just going to say that there, just like anybody else, preachers are weird animals sometimes, and church people, we are too. And I say that affectionately from my tribe, not ashamed. It's just like you just kind of got to poke fun at yourself and acknowledge we could be weird sometimes, sometimes a lot of times, but still love us. But one of the things that for some churches and it's almost like if you don't throw down the gauntlet enough, you're not representing, or you're watering down, or and I don't think that you have to be like that. I think there's a way. It's interesting, the thing about, obviously Jesus is central to my life and what we do, but I love the fact that Jesus was described as full of grace and full of truth. It's not like he was half and half. It's like, okay, 100% grace, 100% truth. Now, whatever you want to make of that, one of the things I love is that means you look at Jesus, he said some hard things, and he really upset. He always upset religious
Mm-hmm.
people, not so much the sinners, that he gravitated to. And yet, so he was full of grace and pulled people in, but he was full of truth and said some really difficult things because he said certain things and called for commitment. And so I like that idea, and I think that's something we can learn from, is be full of grace and truth. Like, hey, say what you believe. Like, no, I think one of the most unattractive things that an unbeliever can come to is you get so watered down at some point that you don't stand for anything. I think people are expecting you
Mm-hmm.
to believe in something. But so that's the opposite side. The other side is being so hardcore and not showing any sort of grace in your presentation, or the recognition that not everyone agrees with you, or at least at the level you do, and acknowledging them. And Jesus had a whole thing where it was like, come and see, and that was his first thing, and just kind of walk with me, talk with me for a while. Let's engage and have a relationship. So I don't know. For me, I think it just takes intention to do that. And even one of the simple, there's things you don't notice, but people can do. For example, for me, one of the big things is I heard from a preacher years ago: take the cookies and put them on the bottom shelf. In other words, don't try to sound
Mm.
high and lofty. Take super complex ideas and make it real simple. So I always feel when people say, "Oh, that was a good, simple, clear message today," I'm not offended. Like, if I can get to the
Right.
place of simplicity, it takes complex thinking to sort of boil down and distill to that. I'm fine. I don't need people. So I think that's one of the ways, is if you don't use Christianese every week and just kind of lofty
Right.
theological terms, it's just like, just help people understand what the heck you're talking
Yeah.
about. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of ways you can do it, and it's obviously intentional culture, but I think it's important, and I just want to give you props too, because you doing this is what I don't look at, and you challenge some churches, you challenge kind of what we do, and I know with the message, all of that. But if we're actually humble enough to listen to you, you provide an invaluable service, because you're a set of eye. And I've told you that I have, there's a group of people in our church that were like, how do we better reach out to people in the community and share the message and so forth, or how do we create experiences for when people do show up so they enjoy it. I've got a group of leaders in our church listening to your podcast, and finding out, like, hey, if you secret shop us, we don't want to be the ones where, man, we can't say the name, or we did say the name and we're cringing. We, maybe that happens, but we want to try to
Right.
avoid that, not just for the podcast, but so that everyone can have a good experience. So I think what you're doing is, first of all, it's bold. I love the idea. It's creative, and I really hope you are able to get back to this and keep that up at whatever level. And I obviously this is totally out of everyone's hands, so I like it. But I think it's a great value to churches and faith-based organizations that are willing to listen.
Yeah, I want to be a value to those who are religious and non-religious, because I think there's been people who have been worshiping something for thousands of years, whether it's the sun or the rain or the this or the that. So they're going to do what they do. And then there's people who are non-religious, and there's such a division where there doesn't need to be a division. And how do we bridge community, and how do we bridge having activities and connecting, and it not being the anti, kind of thing. And one of the things that I heard was a word that you used, and I talked to another person about churchisms, which are so funny, and I will do an episode on that.
Nice.
But one and one of the words that I heard you use was tribe. And I don't really hear people saying tribe very often, except when I listen to some pastors or church talks. And I'm sure it's somewhere, I'm sure they use it elsewhere. But when I think about tribes, I think about people being in their own like group, and them being like, it's us against the world. I think we get that way with our political party. I think that's part of another thing too, since I'm very involved in my political party, and I just see where we're going with that too. I want to try to anti-tribe us or something. I don't know, detribe us, or I don't know, but try to figure out how to bring us together. So it's been a lot of fun to do that.
No, no, I get it. That's even helpful language because when I use the term tribes, I wasn't thinking in those terms in terms of it being a divisive, or it's just more talking about, hey, a group of like-minded people. But I get it. So yeah, I appreciate that.
So I wanted to talk to you about, you've had atheists on stage with you before, and I think I remember our conversation that you were going to be planning and figure out how you could do that again. Can you tell me about what you did in the past and what you're trying to plan for in the near future?
Yeah, well, I think so. It ties into a couple things. One is how you talked about how do you get people from sort of places of belief and unbelief to engage with each other. 'Cause I think we both would agree that you have voices on both sides that sort of shout past and talk over each other, and that are forcefully trying to persuade one way or the other. And yet you have a lot of people that would like to, and look, I'm sure we would say, I would love to persuade you to believe like I do. And I'm sure you'd say the same exact thing. So we
Hmm.
don't have to make a secret about that. And yet how
Right.
we could still have healthy engagement. Because okay, that's on the table. We're not hiding that. But
I've
now,
tried, Bill.
yeah, man,
I've tried with you before, man.
oh, I know. Listen, you're good, and we're going to keep trying. Like I respect it, right? But what
Right.
I've appreciated is we're able to maintain a friendship and a healthy dialogue despite that, right? It's not at the end of the
Right.
day we're mad at each other, or even like whatever. We can get passionate, but
Yeah.
it doesn't mean we get angry. Um,
No.
so, and that's cool. But I think for us, the reason we did that is a few years back, we had a local theologian and the president of the American Atheist Society, David Silverman, who was the president at the time, do a debate on stage. And what we loved about it was we had a lot of atheists, agnostics come, and we had people invite those friends. And it was a good exchange. I mean, there was a great back and forth, and it's a risk, obviously, when you're going to give a platform to someone who believes the exact opposite of you and would love to kind of tear down what you believe in. But it's a risk for
Hmm.
them also to come into that environment and be up on stage. But we did that, and we had a couple events around that. And then a year or so later, we had Hugh Ross, Reasons to Believe. It's a group of scientists who are Christian. I have to be careful not to say Christian scientists because that's got its own connotation, but like an old Earth creation model that believe that are strong Christians, like an astrophysicist, a biologist, a philosopher. So they've got a cool team. But we had them come out, and we had Hugh Ross debating an atheist doctor and coming on stage, and we had that platform that was hosted at the UConn West Hartford campus. And again, it was a great thing. And you know what I had? There was this small crew of atheists that were kind of going back from the other events that we were doing. And they just come up to me and say, we appreciate you guys. We don't believe what you do, but
Oh, good.
I like that you have this place where we can get together and exchange ideas. And
Yep.
so for me, obviously what I want to do is I would love for people to hear that there is a strong reason component, because faith is faith, but I think that faith has to come with reason. You're not going to get there entirely by reason, but I would like to say that here are some good reasons behind faith, and to kind of look at some of those things and have people exchange ideas with it. I love the idea that it pulls people in from the community that wouldn't otherwise engage, maybe gives people to think about. If nothing else, gets us kind of in a healthy environment, because it's not it's not like a verbal cage match. It's like no one man left standing kind of a thing. It's a healthy exchange, and
Yeah.
it gets a little spirited. But so we were looking to do that again this fall, something like that. And obviously with COVID, I mean, the game's all changed at this point, so we're not sure what we're going to do. We may delay. We were going to do a whole series called "If Christianity is Real, Then Why?" Kind of dot dot dot. And each week we'd take on a tough topic and deal with one of the challenges, whether it's suffering or any of the standard things that people will say, hey, what about this, and to try to engage that in a message. And as part of that, we were going to have a highlight debate. I don't know that we're going to be able to do that this fall. Things are so uncertain for us, particularly meeting in a school. So not only will we probably be churches be last, where we can meet again, when we can meet again, do we have to change our locations? There's so much uncertainty, so I don't know that we're going to be able to plan that, but we're certainly going to do it in the future if we can't do it. But it's always been a fun thing for us.
I'm glad you're delaying it until people can come into a place, because I don't know how many would dial in. I mean, you would have the people who dial in, and maybe a little uptick. But when you can get people to go, I think atheists sometimes are starving for some places like that they can go, and they are being represented as well, and just to come in and interact. And I think that would be so great. And I'm glad you're kind of holding it off a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's important. In fact, by the way, that's why we did it at UConn last time. Just trying to create a safe third place, even though we meet in a public high school. So it's just another environment to where it's an academic environment. So people expect like I'm going to go in to learn and open my mind. But also it was just a place where it's like, hey, this is not our home turf, or it's kind of like coming to a neutral space. And certainly the internet can be that. But you're right. I hate to delay things, but it's kind of like you would have loved to do your 52 and 52, right? Life
Yeah.
happens, you adapt and adjust. And so we have great uncertainty about when we're doing it, but we are committed to doing something like that again soon.
Yeah, I like what you said. It's not your home turf, because when you go to everybody, they all know where all the bathrooms are and the this and the that, and they just walk around with a different level of confidence. But when you're both in a building that you're not familiar with, there's this little level of, just as those tiny uncertainties can take away a bit of the confidence and overconfidence kind of attitude of this. You're on our home turf, as you say. Yeah, so I'm excited about that. I can't wait to hear what happens with that going forward.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun, and you'll certainly be invited once we get the details on that.
Oh, thanks. I'm looking forward to it. We're going to sign off here. I'm going to have a 2-part episode of my conversation with Bill. So tune in next time for more on a 4-week series he'll be starting at Calvary Fellowship regarding physical, emotional, and mental health. He also talks about why Calvary, what makes Calvary special. He also gives a few ideas about Face the Sun topics and how I can use this podcast in ways to reach out to others and do things together with non-religious and religious. If you have ideas for this podcast, you can email facethesun2020@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Until next time, remember to face the sun.